Test. Yep.
I can hear you okay.
Scott Lindblad, the only American who prefers you call him on a Sunday morning. The number is 847-475-1590. You're listening to Lindblad on 1590 WCGO.
Welcome back and good morning. You're listening to WCGO, 1590 AM Chicago and 1590WCGO.com on your computer or mobile device. I am in the studio with a gentleman that lives by the credo that no matter your age, your best is yet to come. Bruce Conner is a Masters World Sprint Champion speed skater. He's the current holder of 4 Masters World Speed Skating records. He qualified for the U.S. Olympic trials for the long track speed skating at age 19, at age 49, at age 53, and the oldest ever to do so at age 56. And he is skating and training faster now than he ever was before, even at the age of 17. Thanks so much for coming in, Bruce.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Just those facts alone. Because we're kind of in the same age group, and when you're talking about world class and fastest in the world and that kind of stuff, it's pretty amazing. You have a book. It's called Faster as a Master: Breaking Down Barriers, Journeying Toward Wholeness. And Bruce uses his experience to help others to get to their next level, whatever that might be, whether it's in sports or just a better quality of life. Now, Bruce, you're not only a competitive speed skater, but you're also, as I mentioned, an author, but you're also a commercial airline pilot for United Airlines.
That's right. Yes. I've been at United now for 30 years.
Oh, that's cool. That's got to keep you busy now, right?
Yes, it does.
Well, let's talk about the book first. It's a very compelling, you have a very compelling background, and your book, Faster as a Master. Explain the title of the book.
Well, I was on the national team when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, and was competing at a very high level, and just missed the Olympic team by a couple of spots back in 1975, 76 for the Innsbruck Olympics then. And since I trained so hard at that point to make it to that goal and was unable to make it, I amputated that part of my life. And so I walked away from the sport for 20 plus years. In fact, I don't think I even put on skates at all for 12 years. Wow. And that's one interesting story in my book, how I just kind of reconnected with skating, and the seed was planted for me to come back to the sport that I absolutely loved, but had a real tough time with when I was 19. And so as this process continued, I was still fairly active as an adult athlete. I was doing 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. Occasionally I would do a triathlon, and I was in the middle of the pack. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I got back into something that I was good at. And so I got back into skating when I was about 40. I don't remember exact time, but at the time, the rink that I was training at in Milwaukee had been changed to an indoor facility instead of an outdoor facility. And so the facility now was open almost year round. And so I had ice capability. The ice was better. And I thought, wow, I wonder what I could do if I really, put my mind to this again. And so I was skating just for fun and bought some new skates and actually was skating faster than I was when I was 19 years old. And I thought, this is amazing to me that the technology was helping me go faster, but what was this really about? And so as a master speed skater, I am faster than I've ever been in my life by far. It's not even close. And so that's the basis for the title, is that being faster as a master. And there's so many factors that are involved in being able to perform athletically that I thought, as I'm smarter, as a middle-aged adult, how could I achieve something different that people had done before? And so one of the primary blockages to that was the concept of that we've all been told that as you get older, you get slower. And so I thought, wait a minute, is that really true? And I was able to break down that barrier and say, what's really important here? And so I thought, if I could break down that barrier and get faster as I get older, because I'm smarter, I can train smarter, I can hire a coach, I can have better equipment, I can have better facilities. What's the limit to my achievement here? And so I started on that journey, and I had a lot of issues relative to my amputation of my sport in my life back in when I was 19 years old, back in 1975. Right. And so as a result, I had a lot of baggage relative to that. And so I had to figure out, what can I do here? What am I capable of? And so that vehicle of speed skating provided me with a way to move forward through that very traumatic issue, and time in my life.
Sure, you kind of awaken the competitor in yourself, and you seem to have always had that with you. Your the training, the triathlons, the other stuff, and but that light bulb moment. What was that? Was it when you realized that you were able to skate faster than you did when you were a young man?
Yes, I was skating just
Not that you're an old man.
No. Well, I turned 59 on the 27th of this month. So,
all right, congratulations.
Thank you. It's I don't know, it's surreal almost at this point. Yeah. But yet, when I really look at this whole process that I've been through, and it is definitely a process that I've been through, is that I've tried to be fully engaged in it. And it's not just about sports. This is about achieving whatever it is that you want in your life. And so I thought, what other barriers have I needed to break down in order to move forward?
Right.
And so this is really a universal principle. It's really easy to measure this in terms of speed skating because, I'm on a timed time trial, and I'm racing against other guys and stuff. And that's very tangible. But there's a lot of other intangibles that maybe I could make progress on as well.
Right. And some of those things are not accessible to the 17-year-old mind or the 18, 19-year-old mind that maybe are accessible to you now. Let's talk a little bit about how you started skating. And you grew up in this area, correct?
Yes, I grew up just 2 towns over here from Evanston in Morton Grove.
Okay.
And I grew up across the street from a park. And we had picture windows that overlooked the park. And in the wintertime, there was a little low depression there, and they would freeze it with fire hoses in the wintertime for ice.
Okay.
And we would go over there. And I'm the oldest of 3 boys. I have a middle brother, Bart, who's 2 years younger than I am, and another brother, Mike, who's 5 years younger than I am. And our parents' philosophy on raising 3 boys was to keep us tired. And we spent a lot of time at the park.
Yeah.
My brother Bart, who's an Olympic champion, by the way.
Yes, I do know that. Yes. Bart Connor, right.
Yes. 2-time Olympic champion, 3-time Olympian. He's my younger brother, and he spent a lot of time on the monkey bars and the jungle gyms upside down.
Yeah.
And so, but then when ice time came around, I learned how to skate on figure skates, actually. And what we would do is when they froze the rink in the wintertime, you would see me racing up and down the rink, trying to play tag, sharks and minnows, whatever you want to call those games, And Bart would be doing the same thing, but then he'd do a front flip off into the snowbank. Right. So we're a little bit different.
Right. But you still were trying to, water finds its own level. And, you're the monster trying to go as fast as possible. And he's trying to just find a way to flip.
Well, and he figured out a way to do it. Everybody loved it. He was a show off, you know, and that's what gymnastics is all about. Hey, watch the trick I can do,
Right.
And then my youngest brother, Mike, was also speeding around like I was, but he was the kind of guy that was a great scrapper, and he turned out to be a great short track speed skater.
Okay.
I'm more of a purist. I like the long track. Give me a time trial. Give me my own lane. I don't like to bump into people.
Right.
He didn't mind doing that.
Okay.
So we all kind of, like you said, we all kind of found our own water level, which was important. So that's how I got started in speed skating, was just from the rink across the street. And 2 doors down was a neighbor of ours who was the mayor of Morton Grove at the time. And he grew up in the city of Chicago, and he actually got a high school letter from competing as a speed skater at Humboldt Park down in Chicago in the CYO League.
Okay.
And so he said, hey, you got some talent here. You ought to pursue this. And so my parents were able to find a speed skating competition, a novice speed skating competition in Park Ridge that winter.
Okay.
I think I was 12 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they invited us after the speed skating competition to become part of the brand new Park Ridge Speed Skating Club. And there were 12 families that started that club, and ours was one of those founding families.
Okay.
In fact, my present coach now, Nancy Swider-Peltz, who made 8 Olympic trials, 4 Olympic teams, 2 world records, was also one of those 12 original families.
Wow.
And she's my coach today. So.
Oh, we were talking a little bit earlier about networking and the people that just come into your path, or the people that you meet that, there's a spark there, and that's the direction that you take on that day, that moment, that week, whatever. And it's, just kind of life as it happens.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's neat. And I ask about the, kind of your early days, your roots, and just because I think a lot of parents are kind of looking for ways to lead their children to the sport that they're going to love. Mm-hmm. And I know, I tried every sport. I tried until I found gymnastics, and that was my sport. And I was probably like your brother, always climbing some place that I wasn't supposed to be climbing,
right? Hanging
upside down in a tree, up a telephone pole or something,
Mm-hmm.
So it just was kind of a natural progression. Did you try other sports?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, Bart and I started in gymnastics together. I was 10, he was 8 when we first walked into the gymnasium that our local, our gym teacher, our phys ed teacher in grade school took us with our parents' permission over to the high school to meet the high school coaches.
Okay.
And so when we walked into there the first time, I was 10, Bart was 8. And the first event that we got up on, which was the parallel bars.
Okay.
And he ended up being an Olympic champion on the parallel bars in 1984 in L.A.
Right.
And so I was a gymnast also for a couple of years, but realized after a couple of years that, boy, my little brother could beat the pants off me. I could not keep up with him.
Okay.
And so it was important for me to find my own sport. And so that's what my parents encouraged us to try everything.
Sure.
And my mother had a great saying was that find whatever feeds your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they did have a couple of requirements for that kind of stuff. They said it was important for us to try it, but also finish out the season before we decided to not, go ahead.
Right. Give it a chance.
Yeah, I remember playing flag football, and I didn't like to get hit. I didn't like to run through a crowd. I was willing to, quit in the middle of the season. My parents said, no, you finish it.
Right.
And I finished it and realized that that's what I didn't like to do, and that was okay.
Yeah.
But
check it off the list.
I checked it off the list, and I was able to move on until I finally found speed skating. In fact, Bart actually speed skated for a year as well for Park Ridge.
Okay.
And he realized that he couldn't keep up with me and my brother Mike, and so he gravitated back towards gymnastics. Bart and Mike and I gravitated more towards the speed skating, and as a result, and my mom was a bowler, my dad's a golfer, and so, we all kind of had the things that fed us.
Right.
And that was important to do that. And so all of the drive early on in my life came from me.
Right.
It had nothing to do with my parents. And it wasn't about acceptance. It was about pure competition. I wanted to compete.
Right.
And for some reason, I'm very driven. I'm very competitive in a lot of areas of my life. And as long as I don't take it to an extreme, I'm usually pretty good about it.
Right. And I think that's something that as an athlete, we all have to kind of, we have to watch for that, to, going overboard, just putting everything over on one side and not getting the balance in our lives.
Balance is extremely important. Obviously, for my speed skating, I balance on a 1.1 millimeter blade, so yes.
Right.
Very finite, literally balance is important, but also, you're right, balance in my life in terms of how do I shift my priorities. When I was 19 years old, that's my entire identity was tied up in my performance.
Right.
And when I didn't perform, I trained so hard. I was so overtrained when I got to the Olympic trials. As I got closer and closer to the trials in 1975, my times were getting worse and worse and worse.
Oh, okay.
And so I didn't understand what was going on. I had no coach to tell me to stop. In fact, if somebody told me to stop, I probably wouldn't do it anyways.
Sure.
Because I was so driven at that point. Right. And so I didn't have balance. And so that's where, when I got back into the sport, when I was 40 plus, I was able to maybe And I tread very, very lightly when I started to get back into it because I didn't want to repeat the same things I did before.
Yeah.
And hopefully I was a lot smarter about this. I could have a little bit more balance in my life. And as a result, I could do it in a much more conscious way. And my identity was no longer tied up in my performance, although it's important to me, but it didn't make me. It wasn't the single point in my life. And so if I failed, I didn't have to amputate that part of my life.
Right. Right. And, I think as we learn as, young athletes, young men, we've been doing something for so long. Yeah. Like you were, you were training, you were, it was speed skating and then maybe everything else. And we don't know how to separate, usually kids don't know how to separate that, especially when they're driven, especially when they're goal oriented.
Yes. And our family was, and I don't know really where this came from, but I was definitely goal oriented. Now it's a lot different for me, especially after the last Olympic trials a year and a half ago. I've been training, but just for fun. And it's a whole different ballgame for me. It's a whole different perspective for me.
Yeah.
And so I've gone through this entire transition towards being driven again, and then kind of trying to temper it, with some other priorities because I have, a family and I have a career and I have, other things in my life that are important to me as well. And so I have to balance all of that. It's very difficult.
It really is. And, I think, as we mature, we find ways to get that balance that we don't.
Hopefully we find ways.
Right.
If not, usually life hits us in the head with a 2x4 and we get the,
Ideally, yeah. Right.
But that happens and that's part of the process and that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. I've fallen down a number of times. I've literally fallen down and I've physically fallen down. I've fallen down emotionally. I've fallen down a lot as I've returned to this sport. And so it's not been a completely smooth ride by any means.
Right.
But I've certainly been grateful for all of the things that have happened to me since that I've decided to return to the sport that I absolutely love that feeds my soul.
Right. And, and that's a great way to put it. We find, and we hope that we find that one thing that will feed our souls. And you had kind of a great voice in the back of your head going forward, through your life probably that reminded you to, what, are you doing something that's feeding your soul, or are you doing it, mindless stuff? Right.
And I definitely found out in my life that if it doesn't feed my soul, it will deplete it. And there's only so much in the tank.
Sure.
And so you realize after a while, if you're beating your head against a wall, that, okay, let's change directions here because this is not working.
Right.
And so that's okay. That's okay. And, then I can make mistakes now and not beat myself up. I used to call myself a perfectionist. Now I'm strive for excellence.
Right.
I think that's a lot more realistic. And like we were talking about earlier, that it's important if I can be a little better today than I was yesterday. That's all that's really important.
Right.
And if I can measure that, that's extremely realistic for me to do. And then it's amazing how much progress we can make. And that's it, demonstrated in my capabilities that you mentioned at the top of the show was I've achieved a lot in my speed skating career. I've achieved a lot in my life. And yet it's not about the achievement. It's about the journey and enjoying the journey now. I have that perspective. Not that I had to have those things in order to have that perspective, but as I achieved those things, I did get the better perspective of those different issues in my life.
I saw a quote in your book. It's and I can't remember who the quote was by, but the quote is, "It is good to have an end to journey towards, but it's the journey that matters in the end." So, I mean, really, I think that's really enjoy the ride, and don't look so much at that goal, at that number, at that whatever it is, because if you don't achieve that, you're gonna, if you don't go about it with the right mindset, you're gonna feel like you failed, and you're not gonna look at the ways that you got.
It's
okay.
But